If you wanted to build a fusion reactor 10 years ago, the logic was simple. Make it really, really big. The bigger the machine, the larger the plasma volume, and the easier it was to confine superheated gas long enough to achieve sustained fusion. That's why the world poured billions into ITER, a project whose main construction platform is so large it takes up the space of 60 soccer fields, which I believe is about the same as 60 American football fields, but I'm not sure. But then came a group from MIT who basically said, what if size isn't the answer? What if we do something else? And their proposal was a machine called SPARC that was barely the size of a room. And they claimed that this machine could achieve net energy from fusion, something ITER's gargantuan monster has not achieved yet. It sounds almost ridiculous. For decades, every fusion model said you needed vast magnetic fields, kilometers of supercooled coils, and mountains of shielding. But SPARC doesn't have any of that shit. It's small, it's fast to build, and there's a chance it might work. The trick is in the magnets they're using, you see. A new generation of high-temperature conductors that are strong enough to shrink an entire fusion reactor without changing the underlying physics. If MIT is right, this little machine could light a path that makes ITER obsolete before it even switches on. And that is exactly what the team at MIT are betting on.
Bit of a fun experiment for you. Have you ever tried Googling your name, your city? Odds are you'll find your home address, your phone number, maybe even family members listed on random websites that you've never heard of, which is weird. But that information is out there. It's being sold, it's being reused, it's being exploited. But that's where today's sponsor Incogni comes in. It's a personal data removal service that works to scrub your details from the internet, starting with the biggest data brokers. But here's the best thing about it. There's custom removals. With the unlimited plan, you could submit links to sites like whitepages.com, trellis.law, or unicourt.com, any site exposing your data, and Incogni's team handles the takedown for you. You just paste the link, hit submit, they deal with the rest. So take your personal data back with Incogni. Use the code MEGAPROJECTS at incogni.com/megaprojects and get 60% off an annual plan. And now back to today's video.
Why size used to matter. Fusion sounds simple when you say it out loud. Take two light atoms, usually forms of hydrogen, smash them together hard enough and you get a burst of energy. It's the same process that powers the sun, which makes it almost poetic. Imagine just the ability of creating a wee little star on Earth. But the reality is, stars have a massive advantage. They've got a lot of gravity because they're really big. They've got enough gravity to squeeze matter at millions of atmospheres of pressure until atoms just can't resist merging. We don't have that kind of force, so we have to cheat to get the same result. In our case, we use an absurd amount of heat. And we're talking roughly 100 million degrees Celsius. That's 6 times hotter than the core of the sun. And when you try and trap something that hot in a machine made of metal, it's like trying to hold jelly inside a cage made of rubber bands. It wants out in every direction. So physicists came up with a workaround. Magnets. Really, really strong, powerful magnets. They twist and confine the plasma, that soup of charged particles, into a shape that never touches the walls. And the idea became, well, the bigger the reactor, the longer you can hold that plasma stable. That's where the Lawson criterion comes in. It's a sort of recipe for fusion, and according to it, you need 3 ingredients in the right balance: temperature, density, and confinement time. You can raise any one of them to make fusion work, but if confinement time is short, you have to make the other 2 extreme, which is why for decades the only answer was to make the reactors huge. That's how we ended up with ITER, a monstrous donut-shaped tokamak being assembled in southern France. It's over 30 meters tall, weighs as much as 3 Eiffel Towers, and when it's done it'll be one of the most complex machines ever built. The logic is, with a bigger volume and longer confinement period came a higher chance of hitting the ever-elusive break-even point where fusion puts out more energy than it takes in. But the thing is, as fusion devices get bigger, they also get slower, more expensive, and harder to build. Projects that started with a 5-year plan are running into 30 years with no end in sight. If you look back, fusion history reads more like a cycle of hope and frustration. In the 1950s, there were Z-pinch devices, the first attempts to compress plasma with electric currents. They produced a lot of enthusiasm, but also a lot of instability. The plasma would twist, kink, and escape, ruining the confinement. Then came tokamaks, which the Soviets invented in the 1960s. These toroidal machines finally gave scientists something they could work with, and by the 1970s, everyone thought that we were 30 years away from practical fusion. Then the 90s rolled around, and, well, it was still 30 years away. By the 2010s, the same story. The joke became that fusion is always 30 years away, no matter when you ask. And honestly, you can see why. Fusion reactors got larger, heavier, and more expensive, but the physics didn't get easier. Holding plasma steady for seconds at a time was already a win. Getting it to self-sustain, though, that was where the problem was. But then in the last decade, instead of asking, how big do we have to make it so we can contain the plasma, some scientists started asking, what if we could build it smaller? And that question sounds naive at first, like suggesting you could build a jet engine out of a hairdryer. But it isn't as wild as it sounds. The key was magnets, specifically a new class of high-temperature superconductors, materials that can carry enormous electrical currents without resistance. Traditional superconducting magnets, like the ones ITER uses, have to be cooled with liquid helium and are limited in how much magnetic field they can produce, roughly around 11 or 12 Tesla. The new ones, based on rare earth barium copper oxide or REBCO tape, can go far beyond that, over 20 Tesla in some cases. That's not just a little improvement. In fusion physics, magnetic field strength has a huge impact. Because the energy confinement scales roughly with the fourth power of the magnetic field, doubling the field can make the reactor up to 16 times more efficient. So suddenly, you could achieve the same conditions in a machine that's half the size. And that's how SPARC was born. MIT and their startup spin-off Commonwealth Fusion Systems decided that if you can make stronger magnets, you can make smaller reactors, and you don't need a $50 billion project to get there. Smaller means faster construction, lower cost, and the ability to test and iterate. It's fusion thinking turned inside out, and that's what's so interesting about SPARC. It's not a wild new physics concept or a miracle material from nowhere. It's an engineering insight that challenges decades of scale-based dogma. The test that proved a new path. The breakthrough happened on September 5th, 2021, at a nondescript lab on Albany Street in Cambridge, where scientists had spent half a decade trying to refine the REBCO tape into coils that could handle stress strong enough to crush steel. You see, a 20 Tesla magnet is more about control than it is about strength, so if too much current is pushed too fast, the material burns itself out. The test they were running was a balancing act between physics and engineering, and failure would have meant never achieving the smallest possible arc. In the control room that morning, engineers ramped up the current one step at a time, and as the magnet began to hum, instruments tracked temperature, vibration, voltage, anything that might hint at instability. And then it happened. The readouts crossed the threshold to 20 Tesla. Dennis White, the director of PSFC, later said that when they hit that milestone, quote, you could feel the future shift. And he wasn't exaggerating. This was the strongest magnet of its kind ever built, one capable of shrinking a reactor tenfold while keeping the same confinement performance. You have to remember what this moment represented. For 70 years, fusion's biggest limitation wasn't theoretical. We knew the equations. We understood how plasma behaves, at least well enough to model it. What we didn't have was the ability to actually build a system compact and efficient enough to be practical. That's why the success of this test was such a breakthrough. It proved that it was possible to engineer the impossible. The team had designed this magnet as a single module in what would eventually be a full toroidal set for SPARC. Each coil was made from hundreds of layers of REBCO tape, wound under incredible tension and cooled with supercritical helium. By the end of the test, the magnet had already stayed at full field without quenching once, and suddenly there was a new possibility in the world of fusion. As one would expect, the investors came trooping in. Within months, Commonwealth Fusion Systems had raised over $1.8 billion in new funding, one of the largest private investments in energy history, from backers like Bill Gates, Google, and several major energy firms. To put what they achieved in perspective, you'd want to imagine if you could take a particle accelerator the size of the LHC and build it on a single campus, or a supercomputer that used the same physics but fit on a desk. That's the kind of paradigm shift that we're talking about here. And the scientific community knew it. Even critics of private fusion companies, people who'd spent careers working on ITER, admitted this was a genuine achievement. The old debate about whether smaller, high-field reactors could ever rival larger-scale ones suddenly had experimental data on its side. But there's something else about this story that often gets missed. The success wasn't just about REBCO or engineering, it was about culture. The SPARC team was a blend of MIT researchers and private sector engineers, a hybrid model that felt more SpaceX than a university lab. They iterated fast, failed quietly, and didn't wait for international committees to vote on the next step. It was fusion research, stripped of bureaucracy, and it showed that small, focused teams could compete with billion-dollar international projects. That's part of why the industry's momentum shifted almost overnight. For White and his team, though, the work was just beginning. They didn't celebrate for long, because that 20 Tesla coil was only step one. The next challenge was to actually use it to build SPARC itself, link those magnets into a toroidal configuration, and see if the plasma would behave as the models predicted. The machine that's trying to rewrite fusion. SPARC, which is short for Smallest Possible Affordable Robust Compact, by the way, is MIT and Commonwealth Fusion Systems' answer to 70 years of frustration. Now, on paper, it's a tokamak, just like ITER, but in practice, it is a completely different philosophy. Instead of trying to build the most perfect machine possible, SPARC is trying to build the smallest viable one. SPARC's central chamber, the donut that holds the plasma, will stand only about 3 meters tall, with its plasma tube radius of roughly 1.85 meters. Compare that to ITER's 6.2 meter radius and 30 meter height, and you start to see the difference. SPARC could fit comfortably inside of one of ITER's assembly halls and still have room to spare. But despite that size difference, SPARC's magnetic field will be twice as strong. Those 18 high-temperature superconducting HTS coils built from Rebco tape will generate magnetic fields exceeding 20 Tesla, enough to squeeze plasma at pressure hundreds of millions of times greater than Earth's atmosphere. The goal is to achieve a fusion energy gain factor, or Q, greater than 1. That means producing more energy from fusion reactions than the machine consumes to sustain them. SPARC's design aims for Q10, 10 times more energy out than in. To put that in perspective, the best tokamaks in history, like Jet in the UK, managed a Q of about 0.67. ITER, once complete, hopes to reach Q10 as well, but not until the mid-2030s. SPARC aims to do this before the end of the decade. Now, that doesn't mean there's going to be a power plant. SPARC is a demonstration device. It's designed to prove that compact, high-field fusion can be achieved. The next step after that is ARC, a larger, grid-connected version that could continuously generate about 200 megawatts of electricity. ARC will reuse SPARC's magnet technology, but add the systems needed to actually extract heat, drive turbines, and feed power to the grid. It's a remarkably pragmatic roadmap. Instead of one gigantic leap, MIT and CFS are taking 2 deliberate steps. First, show the physics works, then scale it into a working power plant. And they're doing it fast. SPARC's construction began in 2023 at Devens, Massachusetts, an industrial site about an hour from Boston. The plan is to complete assembly by 2025, achieve first plasma around 2026, and aim for net energy demonstrations soon after that. If that happens, SPARC could beat ITER to break away by nearly a decade at a fraction of the cost. ITER, the world's largest scientific collaboration, involves 35 nations and a price tag north of $50 billion. SPARC's estimated budget, by comparison, is under $3 billion, raised almost entirely from private investors. Technically, SPARC is still a tokamak, a toroidal chamber where plasma is shaped and confined by a combination of magnetic fields, the toroidal field from the main coils and a poloidal field from auxiliary systems. But nearly everything about it has been rethought. Its magnets are modular, meaning each core can be removed or replaced without dismantling the entire reactor, a small but transformative feature that could save years in maintenance. Its cooling systems are simplified because HTS materials operate at higher temperatures, around 20 Kelvin instead of 4, allowing the use of supercritical helium. Even the structure itself is lighter and more compact, meaning future versions could be built faster, maybe even mass-produced. The roadblocks ahead. Now, for all the excitement, there's a quiet understanding among people close to SPARC that this could still fail. SPARC is pushing the limits of control. Its plasma will reach over 100 million degrees Celsius, 10 times hotter than the core of the sun, contained inside a magnetic cage just a few meters wide. That's like holding a miniature star in your hands and hoping the walls don't melt. The smaller you make the reactor, the less margin there is for error. In ITER, there's room to absorb fluctuations and distribute heat. In SPARC, a small wobble in the plasma could mean a full shutdown. Every microsecond of instability has to be corrected in real time with control systems that react faster than human perception. And then there's the question of magnet durability. The high-temperature superconductors, Rebco tapes, are what make SPARC possible. They can generate magnetic fields nearly twice as strong as ITERs while staying compact and efficient. But they've never been exposed to a real fusion environment before. Usually, when deuterium and tritium fuse, they release high-energy neutrons that slam into the reactor walls and components. Over time, that radiation can damage everything it touches – metal, insulation, even the superconducting layers themselves. If the Rebco coils degrade under bombardment, performance would drop. Repairs won't be simple either because these magnets are tightly wound and cooled. Replacing one could take months and millions of dollars. No one yet knows how long they'll last under real fusion conditions, and the only way to find out is by building and running SPARC. Another major challenge is heat exhaust. It is one of fusion's most unsolved and underappreciated problems. Every fusion reaction releases energy in incredible localized heat where the plasma meets the machine's inner walls. Diverters, the specialized components that handle the exhaust, must manage heat fluxes higher than those inside rocket nozzles. If the diverter fails, the entire vacuum chamber can be damaged beyond repair. Large reactors like ITER are already struggling with this. SPARC's compact design makes it even harder. The smaller volume means heat builds up faster, and there's less surface area to spread it out. Engineers are exploring new materials and cooling geometries, tungsten tiles, liquid metal layers, advanced alloys, but none of them have been proven at SPARC's power density yet. And even if SPARC's plasma performs perfectly, the fuel itself introduces its own complexity. The deuterium-tritium mix that powers most fusion designs is potent but delicate. Deuterium is easy to extract from water, but tritium is rare and radioactive, with a half-life of just over 12 years. Most of the world's supply comes as a byproduct of heavy water nuclear reactors in Canada and South Korea, and only a few kilograms of it exist globally. Handling it requires specialized containment and licensing that can slow progress for years. SPARC will consume small amounts for its tests, but any commercial follow-up will need a sustainable tritium cycle to breed new fuel as it burns the old. That's an entire subfield of research that's still largely theoretical. Without it, fusion just can't scale. Then come the regulatory and logistical hurdles. There's no established framework for licensing a private fusion reactor in the US because no one's ever built a fusion reactor that produces significant power. SPARC's developers are working with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to chart new ground, a process that could be as slow as the engineering itself. And yet, for all those obstacles, SPARC doesn't need to clear everyone to matter. Even if it never achieves full Q greater than 1, the data it produces will be priceless. Validating the physics of high-field compact reactors would shift the entire field's direction. It would prove that smaller machines can reach the energy threshold that's eluded scientists for 70 years. If SPARC falls short, it could still succeed in the ways that count. It could confirm the magnetic confinement models that will guide the design of ARC, the next reactor in line. It could reveal exactly where material fatigue sets in, or how to build better diverters, or how to stabilize plasma more efficiently. Those lessons are how real revolutions start. The people at Commonwealth Fusion Systems, they understand this better than anyone. Many of them have already spent careers chasing projects that never reached ignition. They know science is slow. So when they say SPARC might hit net energy, they're not trying to boast. They're putting forward a hypothesis that will take years of debugging, retesting, and redesign to prove. SPARC's team knows that they're building something that might not work, but they're also building something that must be tried. Every step forward, every test, every failure, every adjustment brings the dream a little closer to reality. And if that reality looks anything like the one that they're chasing, even the roadblocks won't matter much in hindsight, because the difference between impossible and inevitable has always been measured in persistence.